Get out! I said get out! You'll never trap me again! His furious voice thundered through the perfect suburban doorway, the sound slamming harder than the door itself. And then, silence. Only her sobs broke the air as Emma, clutching her swollen belly, dragged herself across the polished steps, suitcase tumbling behind her. Tears streaked her face, her cries mixing with the sharp sting of labor as she stumbled into the daylight, abandoned when she needed him most. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this touched you. Emma Parker's contractions began earlier than she had expected, sharp waves that tightened her belly and stole her breath as she steadied herself against the smooth banister of their wide suburban staircase. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Bennett house, bouncing off polished hardwood floors and expensive furniture that looked more like displays than a home. She called out softly at first, "Mark? It's starting. We need to go." Her voice trembled, but not from fear. More from the instinctive urgency she felt as another contraction clawed its way through her body. Mark appeared in the doorway, adjusting his cufflinks and checking his phone like he was late for a business lunch. His tall frame cut a sharp outline against the entryway. He didn't look like a husband about to welcome his first child into the world. He looked inconvenienced, like her pain was an interruption he didn't have time for. "You pick now, of all days?" he muttered, sliding his jacket on with a practiced flick. "Of course you do." Emma winced, bracing her hand on the wall as the ache rolled through her. She gathered her breath. "Please, Mark, the hospital bag is ready. Just help me to the car. It's time." He turned toward her, his face tight with contempt. "You always do this. Drama. Tears. Trapping me with your chaos." He stepped closer, lowering his voice, though the cruelty in his tone was sharp as glass. "You think I don't see what this is? Another leash. Another way to control me." Her eyes widened. "Control you? I'm giving birth to our child. I'm not playing games." Mark gave a cold laugh. "Our child? You mean your ticket, your way to keep me tied here when I deserve better." Another contraction hit, bending Emma forward. Sweat pricked at her hairline as she clutched the doorframe, trying to breathe the way she had been taught in classes. Her voice broke when she pleaded, "Please, don't do this. I need you, just this once. Be here." Instead of offering his hand, he reached for the suitcase by the door. With a violent yank, he pulled it upright and shoved it through the open doorway. The bag tumbled down the front steps, landing with a dull thud on the walkway. Emma froze, disbelief mixing with the sharp twist of pain in her lower back. Mark's words cut her deeper than the contraction ever could. "Scream all you want. Die with your baby for all I care. You'll never ruin my life again." Emma's throat closed, tears burning her eyes. "Mark, you're nothing to me now," he said flatly, and with one shove against her shoulder, he pushed her toward the door. It wasn't enough to send her sprawling, but the message was clear. "Get out!" She caught herself on the railing, fighting to steady her breath as the door slammed behind her. The sound echoed in the quiet, afternoon neighborhood, a cruel punctuation mark on the end of their life together. Emma turned slowly, staring at the closed door she had walked through 1,000 times, as a wife, a partner, someone who believed she mattered. Now it stood like a wall, separating her from the man who had vowed to stand by her. Another contraction ripped through her, forcing her to bite down on her lip until she tasted blood. The suburban street stretched calm and indifferent, lined with manicured lawns and parked cars. Curtains shifted in nearby windows. Neighbors peeked, but didn't step outside. Their silence said enough. They would watch, but they would not intervene. Emma stumbled down the steps, clutching her belly, sweat streaking down her temple. She bent over her suitcase on the walkway, trying to steady herself against the swell of pain. Her mind spun. How could he? How could the man she trusted throw her out at the very moment she needed him most? A porch light flicked on across the street. A neighbor in casual clothes opened her door a crack. "Everything okay?" she called softly, though her body stayed hidden behind the frame. Emma tried to lift her voice over the tightness in her chest. I need to get to the hospital, please." The woman glanced toward Mark's house, then back at Emma. "Where's your husband?" Emma's mouth trembled. "Inside." Her voice cracked. "Please, I just need a ride." The neighbor hesitated, hugging herself. "I can call you a cab." Without waiting for Emma's response, she disappeared back inside. Emma's body quivered as she bent with another contraction. She pressed her forehead against the cool metal handle of her suitcase. Her breaths came fast and shallow. The laughter of children echoed faintly from a nearby yard, a jarring contrast to her reality. Moments later, the neighbor reappeared and held up her phone. "Cab will be 10 minutes, she said quickly. "Do you want a towel or something?" Emma forced a nod. "I'll be fine." The woman lingered for a second longer, then slipped back into the safety of her warm home, closing the door behind her. Alone on the walkway, Emma pressed her hands against her belly. The daylight felt cruel, exposing her pain for the world to see, yet no one came closer. She fought for breath, whispering to herself between contractions, "Hold on, baby, just hold on." The minutes stretched endlessly until headlights finally appeared at the end of the block. A yellow cab slowed, the driver's eyes widening as he saw her doubled over beside her bag. He jumped out and hurried over. "Hospital?" he asked. "Yes," Emma managed, voice breaking. "Please. Fast." The driver lifted her suitcase, guided her carefully into the back seat, and shut the door. As the cab pulled away, Emma pressed her forehead against the window, tears sliding down her cheeks. Behind her, the house stood tall and perfect, hiding the man who had shut her out. Ahead of her, the city blurred into motion, indifferent to her pain. She held her belly, whispering again into the space between contractions, "We're going to make it. I promise." The cab jolted to a stop under the glaring fluorescent lights of the emergency entrance, and the driver hurried around to open the door. Emma's legs trembled as she stepped out, one hand gripping the doorframe, the other clutching her belly. A contraction clenched her body, forcing her to bend forward with a low groan. The driver slipped his arm under hers and steadied her. "You're here now," he said gently, guiding her through the sliding doors. Inside, the hospital lobby buzzed with the tired rhythm of night. The beep of machines, the shuffle of rubber soles, the low murmur of voices. Behind the desk, a triage nurse looked up, scanning Emma in a single glance. She moved quickly, pulling a wheelchair forward. "How far apart?" she asked, her voice firm but kind. Emma lowered herself into the chair, breath uneven. 3 minutes. Maybe 2. I can't tell anymore. The nurse pushed her toward a small room. "First baby?" "Yes," Emma whispered. "Any support person?" The nurse's eyes flicked toward the door, expecting a partner to rush in. Emma shook her head, her throat thick. "Just me." The nurse's expression softened. "I've got you. You're not alone." They wheeled her through the maze of hallways and into a room lined with monitors. Straps tightened around her belly, and soon the quick, steady rhythm of her baby's heartbeat filled the air. Emma closed her eyes and let the sound anchor her, a lifeline against the storm inside her. Another nurse adjusted her IV, whispering encouragement. But Emma caught the sidelong glances from others, their eyes sliding over her empty bedside. Whispers at the desk floated back. "Her husband left unstable, I heard." She clenched her jaw. The rumors had already followed her here, carried in on invisible currents. Hours stretched. Nurses came and went. Pain rose and fell like relentless tides. Emma's thoughts tangled with memories, her husband's words, the slam of the door, the neighbor's silence. When the next contraction seized her, she dug her nails into the bed rail, whispering through clenched teeth, "God, please." The door opened. For a moment, Emma thought maybe Mark had changed his mind. But it was her mother, Margaret, dressed in a crisp blouse that smelled of heavy perfume. She carried herself like she was arriving at a luncheon, not entering her daughter's delivery room. "Emma," Margaret said, sitting primly in the chair. "You look tired." Emma swallowed, sweat dampening her hair. "I'm in labor, Mom." I heard. Mark called me. Emma's chest tightened. He called you? Margaret's lips pressed into a line. He's worried about you. He said you've been difficult, emotional, screaming. You frighten people when you get like that. Emma's heart lurched. Mom, he threw me out while I was begging him to take me here. He shoved me out the door. Margaret sighed, her tone flat. He said you were screaming. People remember that kind of thing. You don't handle stress well, Emma. You never have. The nurse shifted closer, her hand resting protectively on Emma's arm. Emma fought to keep her voice steady. I begged you for help 2 nights ago. Do you remember? I stood at your door and you looked at me through the peephole. You didn't open it. Margaret glanced at the nurse, uncomfortable. That wasn't the time. I didn't want to involve the neighbors. Emma's chest heaved. And now you come here, repeating his lies. Why? Margaret's eyes narrowed. Because we need to talk about the baby, what's best for her. Mark has stability, a home, a job. You don't even have a plan. Maybe we discuss temporary custody until you're settled. Emma's lips trembled. A sharp contraction tore through her, but this time she didn't bite back the scream. She let it echo in the small room, raw and primal. The nurse tightened her hold, glaring at Margaret. Please leave, Emma said through clenched teeth. Margaret blinked, shocked. Excuse me. Please leave, Emma repeated, firmer this time. You don't get to sit here and call me unstable while I'm bringing a life into this world. Not tonight. Margaret stood, clutching her purse to her chest like armor. You always push away people who try to help. Don't call me when you can't pay rent. I won't, Emma said quietly. Margaret's heels clicked against the tile as she left, perfume trailing behind her. The door shut, and the silence that followed felt cleaner. The nurse bent close, her voice soft but strong. You are not crazy. You are not unstable. You are in labor, and you are brave. Emma closed her eyes, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Brave. The word clung to her like a fragile thread. She gripped it with everything she had. Hours blurred. The doctor arrived, checking progress with gentle hands. You're strong, she said. The clock ticked loud as a drum. Emma bore down when they told her, again and again, until she lost track of time and pain became the only language her body spoke. And then, suddenly, a cry shattered the air. High, fierce, alive. Emma collapsed back, chest heaving as tears flooded her eyes. The doctor placed a tiny, damp body against her chest. Emma's breath caught. Hi, she sobbed, laughter tangled in the word. Hi, baby, hi. The baby's tiny face scrunched, her mouth open in protest at the world. Emma touched her cheek with trembling fingers. Something inside her cracked open, spilling light into places that had been nothing but shadows. What's her name? The nurse asked, smiling. Emma whispered the name she'd carried in her heart since childhood, the name that felt like hope, like survival. The nurse wrote it down. They weighed the baby, wrapped her in a blanket, and returned her to Emma's arms. Emma stared, tears streaming freely now, whispering into the soft curve of her daughter's ear. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, despite the whispers, the judgment, the betrayal, Emma felt the fragile beginning of something unbreakable. She wasn't just surviving, she was becoming. The first weeks after leaving the hospital blurred into a haze of sleepless nights and aching days. Emma rocked her daughter against her chest in the tiny one-room apartment she managed to rent, its cracked walls peeling paint and a ceiling that dripped when it rained. The cries of the baby filled the space, echoing with a sharpness that reminded her she was alone. She whispered lullabies she barely remembered, her voice trembling but steady enough to comfort the small life depending on her. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, but she ignored it, pouring the last of her milk into a bottle because her child's needs outweighed her own. Morning came with a cruel kind of brightness. Emma pushed the stroller with its squeaky wheels down uneven sidewalks, her uniform folded neatly in a bag she had picked up from the thrift store. Mothers with expensive prams glided past her, their jewelry flashing in the sun, their laughter careless. Emma lowered her eyes, fighting the sting of humiliation that burned behind them. Each step reminded her that she had been cast out, branded unstable, left to scrape her dignity from the floor of her own despair. Her first job was scrubbing the polished floors of a mansion. The homeowner, a thin woman with pearls resting on her collarbone, hovered in the doorway, phone pressed to her ear. "Yes, I heard Mark Bennett remarried already," she said, voice carrying across the marble hall. Poor Emma, though maybe it's for the best. She was unstable, screaming in the street while in labor. That's what they say. The woman looked right at her as she spoke, her eyes filled with the subtle cruelty of someone who enjoyed watching another person's downfall. Emma swallowed hard and scrubbed harder, letting the water sting her raw hands rather than let a tear fall. At night, exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She lay on the thin mattress with her daughter curled into her, listening to the sounds of the city outside, the horns, the sirens, the laughter of people with lighter burdens. Yet even in the suffocating weight of her circumstances, fire smoldered inside her. Each insult, each whisper, each door slammed in her face was fuel. She rocked her child and whispered, "One day, they'll know. One day, we'll rise." She thought often of her father, the only person who'd ever told her she was enough. When she found his letters folded in a small pouch beneath her mattress, her hands trembled as she unfolded the worn paper. The words, written in his steady hand, breathed life into her. If life ever makes you doubt yourself, remember who you are. You don't need anyone to name you. You already have a name. Emma read the lines aloud, her voice low but burning with defiance. Days turned into months, and her strength sharpened. She learned to stretch a single meal into two, to budget down to the last cent, to walk miles with aching feet when bus fare was too much. Employers talked about her behind her back, neighbors avoided her, old friends deleted her number. Society had written her off as a failure, but every time her baby's tiny hand curled around her finger, Emma felt a pulse of determination that no humiliation could kill. One evening, while she fed her daughter by the dim glow of a second-hand lamp, a knock rattled her thin door. She opened it to find a lawyer holding an envelope. He introduced himself as a representative of her late father's estate. Emma's breath caught. She hadn't thought about an inheritance. She hadn't even believed there was one. With shaking hands, she took the documents. The lawyer's words echoed in her ears long after he left. "You have something you didn't know was yours. Something substantial." Emma sat back on the bed, her heart pounding like a drum. She stared at her daughter, whose eyes blinked up at her with innocent trust. The weight of despair loosened, just a fraction, replaced by the flicker of possibility. She pressed her lips to her child's forehead and whispered, "They thought they buried me, but they planted me instead." The fire in her chest roared brighter. She would endure, she would rise. And when the time came, the world, including the man who had thrown her away, would face the woman they had underestimated. Years passed, and Emma Parker was no longer the trembling woman left on a doorstep with labor tearing through her body. The inheritance she had once doubted unfolded into something extraordinary. $50 million, carefully managed, transformed her life not into a parade of luxury, but into a quiet empire. She didn't flaunt it. Instead, she invested, buying properties in overlooked black neighborhoods, funding scholarships for young people with dreams bigger than their zip codes, and creating a foundation that gave struggling mothers the support she never had. Her name began to surface in news articles, whispered with respect. But Emma herself remained a shadow, moving deliberately, building power where no one expected her to. Meanwhile, Mark Bennett's world began to crack. Without Emma's careful presence, his business ventures faltered. Deals that once seemed effortless collapsed under the weight of his arrogance. His new wife, Vanessa, grew restless. She had traded scandal for stability, but Mark's charm was wearing thin, replaced by mounting debts and the gnawing reality that his golden days were slipping. Their marriage soured under the weight of whispered arguments and unpaid bills. The mansion he once used as proof of success echoed with discontent. Fate, however, had a way of circling back. Vanessa, polished and ambitious, applied for a position at a prestigious nonprofit that had become a beacon in the city. She dressed sharp for the interview, rehearsed her answers, and smiled with the confidence of someone who believed she belonged. What she didn't know, what no one had told her, was that the nonprofit she so admired was one of Emma Parker's creations. Emma watched from behind the scenes as Vanessa's application crossed her desk. The recognition sent a shock through her body, but it wasn't fear. It was fire. She read the resume twice, her lips curling into the faintest smile. Vanessa had once mocked her tears, had once laughed at her pain from the safety of Mark's arms. And now, without knowing it, Vanessa was reaching for the very hand she had once tried to push away. Emma didn't rush. She let the process unfold. Vanessa was hired, and Emma made certain she worked under supervisors who demanded excellence. The mistress who had once sneered at Emma's drama now sat late at night drafting reports, answering to a chain of command that ultimately led to the woman she thought destroyed. The irony tasted sharp and sweet, but Emma wasn't finished. Her public recognition grew. Newspapers praised her philanthropy, calling her a force for change. Photos appeared of her shaking hands with governors, standing beside community leaders, smiling at children whose futures she was reshaping. And Mark noticed. He dismissed it at first as coincidence, but the more he saw her name in print, the more unease burrowed into him. He had painted her as unstable, broken, weak. Yet there she was, steady and radiant, commanding the kind of respect he had always craved. One evening, at a gala celebrating philanthropic leaders, Mark stood with Vanessa at his side, pretending not to be rattled. Champagne glasses clinked, cameras flashed, and laughter rolled through the glittering room. But when the announcer's voice rang out, introducing the guest of honor, every sound dimmed in his ears. Emma Parker stepped onto the stage in a gown of deep emerald silk, her presence commanding without effort. Applause thundered through the hall, and in that moment, Mark felt the walls of his pride close in. Emma looked over the crowd, her eyes landing on him with calm precision. She did not flinch, did not falter. She had no need for vengeance in words. The power of her survival, her rise, spoke louder than anything she could say. The woman he had cast out in agony now stood above him, not as his wife, not as his victim, but as a force he could never erase. The tables had begun to turn, and Mark knew it. The shadow he thought he left bleeding on the curb had returned, taller and stronger than ever, carrying fire in her chest and dignity in her step. And for the first time, he understood. He was the one discarded, and Emma Parker was only just beginning. The ballroom shimmered with golden light, chandeliers scattering brilliance across polished floors and gowns that swirled like rivers of silk. Mark Bennett entered with Vanessa on his arm, his jaw tight beneath a polished smile. He told himself this night was his chance to remind people who he was, to show them that wealth and power still belonged to him. But beneath his tailored suit, sweat gathered at the back of his neck. Something about the air in the room felt dangerous, like a storm brewing in a cloudless sky. The evening flowed with chatter and clinking glasses until the announcer's voice boomed across the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's honoree, an unstoppable force of compassion and resilience, the founder of the Parker Foundation, Emma Parker. Mark's chest hollowed out. The applause shook the walls, thunderous and relentless, as Emma appeared at the top of the staircase. She wore emerald silk that clung with dignity, her chin lifted, her eyes clear as glass. Every step she took radiated a power Mark had never given her credit for. The woman he once shoved into the street was now the center of every gaze in the room. Vanessa's hand slipped from his arm. Her lips parted as she whispered, "Emma Parker?" The realization struck her like ice. She had been working unknowingly under the woman she helped destroy. Shame flushed her cheeks. Mark forced a laugh, too loud, too brittle. He pushed through the crowd after the speech, cornering Emma near the terrace. The city lights glittered beyond the glass doors as he hissed, "So this is your little show. You think this makes you better than me?" Emma turned slowly, her expression steady, her fire burning just beneath the calm. "No, Mark. I don't need to be better than you. I only needed to survive you." His jaw clenched. "You owe me. All of this. Your name, your platform. It came from me. Don't forget it." Emma's laugh was low, almost pitying. "What I'll never forget is the night you left me in labor on a sidewalk. You didn't build me. You tried to break me, but I rebuilt myself stronger than anything you could imagine." He leaned closer, desperation spilling through his words. "I need in. Give me access. You can't deny me. I was your husband." Emma's gaze sharpened like a blade. "And that title died the moment you slammed the door in my face. You don't get to claim me now." She stepped past him, shoulders squared, emerald fabric brushing his sleeve like a silent strike. Mark lunged to follow, but two security guards intercepted, their presence firm and unyielding. "Sir, we'll have to ask you to leave." The murmur of onlookers swelled as heads turned. Cameras captured the scene, flashes immortalizing his humiliation. Vanessa stood frozen, her polished facade cracking as whispers rippled through the crowd. Emma didn't look back. She crossed the room with grace, her daughter appearing at the edge of the stage in a simple dress, eyes bright with pride. Emma extended her hand, and the girl slipped her fingers into her mother's, the bond between them glowing brighter than the chandeliers overhead. Together they walked out of the ballroom, heads high, the applause following them like a wave. The man who once cast Emma aside was left in the shadows, a ghost of his former power, while she stepped into the night as proof that survival can turn into triumph, and that the woman he thought would die in silence had become the voice he would never escape. And as Emma walked out of that glittering ballroom hand in hand with her daughter, the same man who once threw her away was left crumbling in the shadows. From humiliation to triumph, her rise was the reckoning no one saw coming. But here's the real question. What would you have done if you were in Emma's place? Would you have forgiven or walked away with fire in your heart? Before you go, don't just scroll. Smash that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment right now and tell us where you're watching from, because trust me, what's coming next will leave you speechless.